With this video I will show you how to create a user registration module. I will be discussing password encryption and validation. This will be a simple user registration module that will work in a development environment on a local system. If this was a live project, I would be including email traffic to confirm legitimate users. Hi, I'm Ben Plessier and, like you, a fervent user of Wappler. I start with the project where we left off in the previous video. Normally I would start with the server-side actions first. With the register and login modules I tend to start with the front end first. What I intend to create is a login button placed inside the navigation bar. When the login button is clicked on, it opens a modal where we have a choice of registering or logging in. All very exciting stuff, so let's get cracking. First I need to open the page in which the navigation bar is placed. I go to the Site Manager. Under Layouts I choose Main. This is the layout for the public module. What stands out here is that the header is constrained in height. Remember when I set the height of the header to 40 pixels when laying out the admin module? This is what happens when no specific header has been nominated. The styling carries through to all headers. Not a great problem. This can be rectified by scrolling down in the Properties panel and setting the height to Auto. You may also remember that I like to place the content inside a main container. I add the container after the header. Here we see another remnant of the styling for the admin module. Main was set with a left margin to accommodate the sidebar. No worries, just remove the left margin. I can now move the content inside the main container. Now for the button. I select the navigation bar and insert a button after navbar nav. I change the button ID and the button text. To send the button to the right side of the navigation bar, I click on Justify Content Space Between. Next comes the modal dialog. For this I insert after main, dynamic modal. The ID needs to be more descriptive. I also add a fade effect, then I get rid of the header and the footer. Heck, I even get rid of the paragraph inside the modal body. Inside the modal body I add a row and a column. I could have added a fluid container first, but in this case the modal acts as the container. Inside the column, I add a tabs with nav component. This produces 3 tabs and 3 content areas. We only need 2, so I delete the superfluous items. I change the text within the 2 tabs to log in and register. With the nav list selected, I change the tabs to pills and the alignment to justified. For this video I will not add to the login side. I will leave that to the future video when I discuss the login module. For now, I remove the paragraph of the second content area. Instead, I will add a registration form. For this, I click on the plus button inside the content area. In the pop-up dialog, I select Blocks, Forms and Register Extended Form. The form is on the narrow side. This is because the form was not designed to sit inside a modal. The quickest way to rectify this is to set the container to a fluid container and to remove the various classes applied to the column. For the modal, all we need is the call class. Hence, I remove the rest. At this stage, I can think of many things that can be done to prettify the form. However, I will restrain myself to stay with the bare minimum requirements. We do not need a company name. Instead, we need a field for the first name and a field for the last name. I select the column that contains the company input field and duplicate it. This gives me a second column. I then rename the ID attribute, the name attribute and change the placeholder text to reflect the first name input field. Then I repeat the same for the last name input field. The remaining input fields are all correctly named. Now for the buttons. I need two buttons, one for cancel and one for register. I select the button that is already there and click on the before arrow. This opens a pop-up where I select Button. I change the button text to cancel. I also give the button a style. You will have noticed that the button position higher than the existing button. To rectify this, I add a top margin of 4. For the existing button, I change the text to Register. And add a bit of styling and change the button type to a Submit button. That takes care of the appearance of the form. I still need to tie up a couple PF loose ends. The Cancel button needs to close the modal dialog. I select the Cancel button and give it a recognizable ID. This step is not absolutely necessary. The existing ID is okay to work with. Then I scroll down to Dynamic Events. Here I choose the mouse on click event. The action is to hide the modal dialog. I choose the form element and change the ID to something more meaningful. I also change the form method to Post. Before moving on to the server side of things, I need to apply validation rules for the form inputs. As you will see further on, these rules will also be applied to the server side. It is important to understand that client-side validation can easily be bypassed by ill-willing scoundrels. The real test occurs on the server where validation rules are relatively safe from hackers. On with the task. I select the first input field and scroll down to Validation Rules. Here I select Required. I repeat this for each of the other inputs. For the email field, I add an extra validation for email. For the password field, I could have added validation for the minimum and maximum length of the password to increase the security. In this case, I decided not to. For the confirm password field, I select Other in the pop-up. There I click on Equal to. For the value, I enter the name of the password field. The checkbox gets the required validation rule and we are done. After the server-side actions, I will return to the form to finalize the form action and notifications. For now, I will save the file and close it. The time has come to create the server-side actions for when the registration form is submitted. For this, I select the Workflows tab. Under Globals, I make sure that there is a connection to the database. This connection was made in video number 5 when the database was constructed. I need to set up a mailer so that a confirmation can be sent to the registrant. Right-clicking Mailer, I add the mailer setup. Because I am working on a local system that has no mail server, I make use of the mail server supplied by my Internet Service Provider, commonly known as ISP. This is a simple mail transfer protocol, otherwise known as SMTP. I add the name of the mail server and the login details. Don't forget to save the file. The last step under G, OBLs is to create a security provider. The security settings that are created here are available for all of the server actions within the project. It will be used when logging in, logging out and restricting access. And because the newly registered user will be automatically logged in, we need the security provider. I right-click the security provider and select Add Security Provider. This creates a JSON file named Security. In the Properties panel, this name can be changed. However, security sounds good to me. Wappler has inserted a unique secret key. This key ensures that security actions originate from this site and not some hacker's site. Our users are all listed in a database. So change the security type to Database. Make sure that the correct database has been connected and click on Users and Permissions. In the pop-up dialog, choose the Users table. The identity is User ID. The username is the email field and the password is the password field. This is all that is required at this stage. I will be coming back here in a future video when I discuss logging in. For now I click on OK and save the file. I also close both of the open files and collapse the globals node. Having set global values, we are now ready to perform server-side action steps. For this, I go to the API tab. You may well ask, what is an API? API is an acronym for Application Programming Interface. In reality, it is a software interface that is layered between the backend and the frontend and is what connects the two. When I right-click on API, it opens a pop-up menu. Here I select to add a folder. As we progress through this project, you will appreciate the creation of a folder structure as part of good housekeeping. I name the folder Security. This is where I will place the register user, login, logout and other security APIs. Right-clicking on Security opens the same pop-up menu. This time I choose Add API Action. I name the action, user_registration. This creates a JSON file with that name. The first task is to connect the previously created form to the API. For this, I click on Input. In the Properties panel, I select the page that contains the form. I then select the form from the drop-down and select the Import from Form button. Under the Post node, we see the form input fields together with server-side validation rules. This is pure Wappler magic. I go ahead and collapse the input nodes. I can now go ahead and create the algorithm for the server-side steps. When I created the site security, I made the user name that of the email address. Now users will often interchange email addresses with lower and uppercase letters. To ensure standardization and prevent problems down the track, I will make the email address to always show in lowercase. I right-click, Execute. In the pop-up menu, I select Add Action. This opens a new window where I choose Core Actions and set value. In the Properties panel, I enter the name of the variable. For the value I choose the email address as it was posted from the form input. I then click on the Format button. This allows me to choose text and convert to lowercase. I save the various windows and am done. As a side note, your user interface may be slightly different to what you see here. This is because I have the experimental features turned on with the expectation that this will be adopted in future versions of Wappler. The next step in the algorithm is to ensure that each email address is unique. Imagine the chaos when a user registers a number of times with the same email address. To make sure that the email address is unique, I add a validate step. In the Properties panel, I click on Validate Options. In the panel that opens, I choose the formatted email address. This is the format that will be placed in the database. The linked field is the name of the form field on the client side. For the validation rule, I choose database and does not exist in database. The table is users. The column is email. The message can be modified. I have left it as is. Save the inputs and we are ready for the next step. This is where the data is inserted into the database. I choose Database Actions and Database Insert. In the Properties panel, I have changed the name of the step to include user. We do not need to output to the front end and the database has been correctly selected. Clicking on Insert Options opens a new pop-up. Here I select the Users table. In the pop-up, we see that all of the database fields are shown. I make sure that the first name and last name values have been correctly entered. For the email field, we need the formatted email address. The password is encrypted. This is done by selecting the formatter and choosing cryptographic. I have chosen to encrypt the password using SHA-256. For the salt, I have gone for a static value for all passwords. A word about this encryption. SHA-256 is a one-way encryption, meaning that it cannot be decrypted. When a password is required, the password as entered by the user will be encrypted using the same encryption method and the same salt. This value will be compared to the encrypted password in the database. If the same, then the user will be validated. The salt is an extra security measure. For databases that contain more personal information than our database, it is best to create an extra field containing a random salt value. As said, for our application this is secure enough. The next two fields have a default value in the database. This was created in video number 5. I can safely remove these two fields. For the created column, I set the value to now. I click the OK button to close the window and we are done with this step. In this step I will send an email confirming the registration. For this, I right-click the current step and click on Add Action. This opens a pop-up where I select Mailer and Send Mail. In the Properties panel, the correct mailer has been entered. I go ahead and enter the subject line. I leave the importance as normal and have no attachments. The sender is the website owner. The email address is fictitious for now. The recipient is the newly registered person. The values for the name and email are obtained dynamically as shown. Remember not to use the entered email address, but the one that we have reformatted. I leave the mail body as static. I then enter the body text. Notice that the value of the password is a dynamic value. Leave the format as text and we are ready for the last step. For this I add a new action. In the pop-up, I select Security Provider and Security Login. In the Properties panel I make sure that the correct value for the username is entered. This is the reformatted email address. The password in the database is encrypted. This means that we have to encrypt the password input to be able to compare them. The same salt as before has to be used. For the reminder I add a 1 meaning that the login details will be remembered for 30 days. This uses a cookie stored on the client. This could be handled by a checkbox in the login form to allow the user to select Remember Me. Save the user registration file and close it. We are done with the back end and proceed to finish the front end off. I select Site Manager and Pages. Under Layouts I choose Main. This is the template for the public module. When the form is submitted, I want the user to be notified that they have been successfully registered and are now logged in. For the notification, I need to add the component. I right-click, App. In the pop-up I choose Components and Notifications. When the Login button is clicked on, it needs to open the modal. For this, I choose the Login button and scroll down to Dynamic Events. In the pop-up I choose the mouse on Click Event. For the action, I choose to open the modal. The next step is to connect the registration form to the API. I had a bit of a problem finding the form while recording. In subsequent tries, this was a lot easier and quicker. Anyhow, finally found the form, after which I choose Make Server Connect Form. For the Server Connect action I choose user_registration. While I have the form selected, I scroll down the Properties panel and select Dynamic Events. Here I choose Server Connect and Success. I could also have chosen one of the other events like Error. But I will leave this up to you to experiment with. For the actions, I choose to show a success notification containing a related message. With a bit of luck, you will not have any spelling errors like here. I'll correct this outside of the recording. I also hide the modal. When the modal is closed, I want the form to reset, meaning that the previously entered data is wiped. For this I choose the modal and scroll down the Properties panel to Dynamic Events. In the pop-up I choose Modals and Hide. For the action I choose to reset the registration form. And we are done. I should now have a fully working registration and login process. The time has come to test the creation. I save the file and open the index page. Why? To put it simply, when a content page is requested, Node.js Express first loads the layout page. The layout page then pulls the content page into it. As a consequence, layout pages by themselves cannot be rendered by the browser because there is no request for a content page. Another consequence is that content pages must be connected to a layout page to be rendered in a browser. With the index page opened in Wappler, I click on the View in Browser button. This renders the complete page. Here I click on the Login button. In the modal, I choose Register. Make an entry and choose the Cancel button. This is to test the form reset action. When I press the Login button once again, the form is empty, proving that the form reset action works as intended. I go ahead and enter all of the required inputs. When I click the register button, the modal closes and we see a notification that shows a successful registration and login. Want to know how successful? For this I go to the database manager and view the users table. Here we see that my registration has been entered into the database. The user ID shows as 8. This would normally be a 1 for a first entry. My fiddling with and testing using the database has correctly incremented the ID to its current value. Also note the lowercase email and encrypted password. The default values for group and status have been correctly entered as well as the current date and time. As the icing on the cake, I have just received this email. Back in the browser, we see that the login button still shows despite being logged in. In the next video, I will change that button for a logout button. I will also create a login and logout procedure. I hope to see you there. Thank you for watching.